What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Stochastic NHL Strategy Show. I'm your host, Josh Harris. I have a 5-game slate here tonight. There's 9 games here overall today. It is a holiday in the United States. I wish they put, a few more on the main slate so we could talk about 6 to 8 games. 5 is a little short, but it's better than 4, and it's better than 14. So we take what we can get here. Joining me to break it down, as always, in his elite winter gear, Cliffy. How you doing today?
Not too bad. Think like a lot of people in the Northeast, kind of digging out from under the snow a little bit, but doing all right. Mad that I missed our Rangers-Habs game last night. I watched like the first half of the game, and then I went to a late show movie. Walked out, 5-4 overtime win. Patty Laine getting it done. That was quite the finish in that game. But yeah, we have a full day of hockey here today. Sharks and Bruins have already started, I think. That's 1-1 after the first period, if I'm not mistaken. I just saw a tweet that said Askarov standing on his head, something like that. I was like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Evergreen.
Yeah, but 5 games here tonight. There are some chalky spots, but there's nothing egregious. You know what I mean? At least when you compare it to the top 2 stack percentage. Like there's nothing like, 2% ownership up 14 or 2% top 2 stack, 14% ownership. Like there's nothing like that. So I think it's pretty wide open on where you can go. There's not a whole lot of injury news that we have to catch up on. So it looks like a pretty clean slate, so to speak.
Clean, except for the fact that there's Chalk Islanders and Jonas Johansson is starting, but we will navigate those waters for you. Let's get into the slate. Before we do, almost 100 of you joining in already at 2:03 p.m. Eastern. Just wanted to say thank you guys for hanging out with us on your Monday. I know it's a holiday, so maybe you're out making some snow angels. Maybe you're sledding with the kids. Maybe you're just day drinking. But thank you for joining us. And if you do want to go premium, you can click the link in the chat. You can use promo code Stochastic15. That'll get you 15% off your first week or month subscription. MMA is back in full swing. PGA is back in full swing. No pun intended. We have NBA, NFL, NHL going right now. So if you do want to check out the premium stuff, including the Sims, which we do not offer for NHL, but almost all the other sports have Sims. Go through that link, use the promo code, and check it out. Tampa Bay Lightning with a 3 total heading into Toronto. The Maple Leafs have a 3.4 total. Tampa, status quo going Kucherov, Point, Gensel, Hagel, Cirelli, Paul, Geeky, Esamont, as our boy Whiskers would say, Zegmis, Gurgle shits, but it's Gergensons. Toronto going Matthews, Marner, Nyes, Nylander, McMahon, Holmberg. They also switched up their power play units. They're going back to a 5-forward unit with Matthews, Marner, Nyes, Nylander, and McMahon. Riley and OEL running the second unit. I didn't see if Nylander's playing on both units. I would imagine he is. Pour one out for the homie Whiskers. He'll be back. But yeah, big news in this game. It's Jonas Johansson for the Lightning, not Andrei Vasilevsky. I haven't looked at data from starter to backup this season, but I would imagine it's in a similar area that Dan Vladar was when Markstrom was the starter. Is probably a pretty big drop-off. According to Tim Vogel, probably my favorite beat writer tweet ever when Colorado traded for Jonas Johansson. He said Colorado is acquiring the worst goaltender in the NHL. He couldn't even stop shots in practice. But yeah, he's a pretty not good backup. I do really like Toronto 1 here. 1, Tampa's not the best team, and 2, at home, they're going to go out a fair bit against Kucherov, Point, Gensel. They're not the best defensive line. They trade chances. They avoid Hagel, Cirelli. So I do really like Toronto 1. We'll have to see where the ownership goes throughout the day because currently they're only at 14.8%. I know Jake's running a new run now. It'll be updated probably in the next few minutes. But currently 24% top 2 stack, 15% ownership on a 5-game slate. That is completely fine here. If you're looking to get in Nylander, I think you can add him. Interesting enough, like Bobby McMahon's on the top power play unit. He shoots a ton. He's not expensive. You could just full power play stack here. Tampa, they don't have the worst penalty kill. They don't have a very good one. They don't take a massive amount of penalties, but they're not at the low end either. I'd probably be more likely just to full stack Toronto 1. I'd try to get Nylander in, whether that's taking Marner out or Nyes out, depending on your cost. Like taking Marner out, like I know I joke around and I say Marner sucks, but like he's having an unbelievable season. So like it's kind of hard to leave Marner off. I think I would, if I'm looking to add in Nylander, I think I go Toronto 1 plus Nylander or take out Nyes, but whatever you want to do. Toronto 2, like they're over leveraged and they're going to see some of that Hagel Cirelli. So if you want to, I don't think I'd full stack a Pontus Holmberg line at 13.5%, but I do get the merit of playing Nylander and McMahon because of the power play. But this is a Toronto 1 game for me on the Toronto side. On the Tampa side, like it's the same issues as always. Tampa 1's too expensive. They're not fully correlated. Tampa 2 is fully correlated. And Toronto does not have a very good penalty kill. So I would definitely be interested in Toronto 2 here again. Again, I would try to find a way to get Kucherov in. If not, I think Hagel Cirelli 2-man is fine, but I would do my damnedest to get Kucherov in. So Toronto power play, I try to get Nylander in. Tampa 2, I try to find a getaway to Kucherov in.
Yeah, I'll start generally on the Tampa side. You mentioned Jonas Johansson. Like he's just not been a good goalie through his NHL tenure. Last 5 seasons, .890 save percentage. I was looking at his goals saved above expected. It's like minus 27 in 65 games over the last 5 seasons. To put that into perspective, it would be about a 65 game season from this year's Tristan Jarry. And Tristan Jarry was just put on waivers. So it's kind of the caliber of goalie that Johansson's been. With that said, we always say with goalies, anything can happen in a single game, right? Like even Jonas Johansson has had pretty good games this year. He shut out Florida in Florida, a 36 save shutout. 1 goal against Seattle, 2 goals against Nashville. I guess that's not that impressive. 2 goals against Pittsburgh. Like those are weaker teams than Toronto, obviously, but he is capable of good games. With all that said, he's made 9 starts this year and he's allowed 29 goals against in those 9 starts. And he has faced a lot of weaker teams is the issue. Like he usually faces the Nashvilles, the Anaheims, the Pittsburghs, like those types of teams. He doesn't face Toronto type teams very often. So it is a step down in net for sure. He is capable of a good game, but any goalie in the NHL, you can say that about any goalie in the NHL. I think that's why, like the Toronto total this morning, when I first looked at it using Stochastics data, was 3.0. Johansson was announced. It's gone up to 3.4. You don't see jumps that high very often unless there's significant injuries announced or something like that, or this backup goalie is announced. So yes, it's a very good spot for Toronto. I have no issue, honestly, with like just 5-man power play stacking. You can fit it in. You can put Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Nyes, McMahon, whatever goal you want. You'll have to go cheap at the other 3 positions, but you can fit it in. And while the Tampa Bay penalty kill has been good, generally speaking, that's a lot of that is with Vasilevsky in net, not necessarily Johansson. So with Toronto's total going up so much, I honestly do like the Toronto side here. Like if you want to even strength stack the top line, I have no issue with that. Ownership is up to 15%, or sorry, I forgot to update that. Ownership was 15% this morning on that top line. It's up to 19% now. I think you can probably expect it over 20% in your single entries and stuff like that. It's kind of why I would full stack. We talked about it on Saturday. I don't like stacking Toronto and leaving Nylander off. He's just too involved in the power play, and he had a goal of 7 shots. So I would probably just 5-man stack the Leafs. If you want to add a cheap defenseman, add a McCabe or an Ekman Larson or something like that, I think that's perfectly fine. Just go with the Toronto onslaught and hope it's one of those games where Jonas Johansson gives up 6 or 7, which he absolutely can. He gave up 4 goals to Montreal. He gave up 5 to Winnipeg, 5 to New Jersey, 7 to Columbus. So that's just this season out of his 9 starts. Like, this guy can get lit up pretty easily. I would probably just 5-man stack Toronto, or just full on Josh stack 6-man, add a cheap defenseman and be on your way. I'm not dipping down to the 3rd and 4th lines here. The Tampa Bay depth has generally been good defensively. Like, they're not good offensively, which is why we don't target them on shorter slates like this. But defensively, they're fine. So I think they can kind of hold serve against the Toronto depth. I think it's the Toronto top 6 that I'd really want in my lineups here. So probably 5-man stack, if not an onslaught from Toronto. If you want to just stack the top line, that's fine. But again, I have a problem stacking the Leafs and not including Nylander. On the Tampa side, again, like Josh said, like, what do you say about a line that's 26,400? Like, obviously they're really good. They don't shoot a ton. Like, Jake Gensel had that brief spurt where he was shooting at least close to 3 shots per game, but I think it's something like 32 shots in his last 15 games, like just over 2 shots per game. So like, even if he gets a goal, it's not really that, like, if he has a goal and 2 shots, it's really not that great. You know what I mean? Braden Point, 23 shots in his last 10 games. He doesn't shoot a ton either. His last 20 games, he has 47 shots, so under 2.5 per game. So again, if he has a goal and 3 shots, like, if him and Jake Gensel have 2 goals and combined for 5 shots, it's not a good night for them. So like, there's just so much that they have to overcome. I would probably, Tampa's going with their regular, or is going with what they've been doing on the power play lately, which is Tampa Bay 2 on one unit, Tampa Bay 1 on the other. Kucherov plays both halves. Chafee plays with the Kucherov, Point, Gensel trio. So I'm fine just going back to Tampa 2 here. Hagel, Cirelli, and Paul. They've been snake bit a little bit by shooting percentage, but they're shooting under 7% and still generating quite a bit. And I do like those matchups against the middle 6 from Toronto. I think that's one place where the Leafs can be had here. Fraser Minton got called up. He's on the 3rd line skating with Nick Robertson. They haven't played a ton together this year, only 45 minutes, but they've been lit up defensively when they've been on the ice. So I think those middle 6 matchups for Tampa 2 is where they can kind of do some damage, and where they're fully correlated on the power play. And Toronto's penalty kill isn't that good. Toronto's penalty kill outside the top 10 for the season, fallen off since earlier in the year. So I think it's a good spot for Tampa 2 here. So Hagel, Cirelli, and Paul for me from that side, and then Toronto 5-man or Toronto onslaught on the other side.
Yeah, I'm a Joe Woe guy, but like, he's kind of in a similar boat to Igor, and he's not as good as Igor. Like, there's only so much you can do with that team in front of him. Like, Min and Robertson haven't played well. They've been run over this season, and now they have Max Domi on the other side. It's like, they're just inviting offense. So, yeah, I do agree with Tampa 2. We just did get another run, and that Toronto top line's just under 20%. And honestly, like, even if Matthews is pushing 30%, I think it's fine. You can get different easily in this game. Columbus Blue Jackets, our Columbus Blue Jackets, with a disrespectful 2.4 total heading into Long Island. No worse place on earth. The Islanders have a 3.1 total. Probably rather live in Kosovo than Long Island. But anyway, Barzal, Lee, Horvat, Nelson, Palmieri, Duclair, Holmstrom, J.G. Pajot, Zizekas, Columbus going Marchenko, Voronkov, Fantilli, Johnson, Sillinger, Van Riemsdyk, Luca, Dell, Bell, Bullas. I really just wanted to say that name. Olivier and Zach Aston Reese. Ton of ownership here on the Islanders top line. I'm kind of in a conundrum here what to do with the Islanders top line. I'm not a big Islanders guy, as you know, obviously. But they're 16,900, fully correlated in a great power play spot against Elvis Merzlikins, whose save percentage is under 9. Yes, he's been better recently, but he's still been pretty bad this season. 20% top 2 stack, 26.9% projected ownership. They're going to get that Marchenko-Voronkov-Fantilli matchup, and they've been pretty good for like Columbus standards. They're like almost 2.7 expected goals against, a little bit worse than league average, but it was a lot worse at the beginning of that sample. They've gotten a little bit better of late, and they're going to be going out a fair bit with Werenski and Fabro, and that pair has been really good. It's a good question, Quick Party. I don't know. I don't want to find out. I don't know if it's in or on. So either. But Cliffy was talking to me this morning about Jack Johnson, and I'll let you give the numbers because I'll probably butcher them. But with Jack Johnson off the ice, Columbus has been much, much better defensively at 5-on-5 and on the 5-on-4 penalty kill or 4v5. So, like, I'm fine with the Islanders here because they're not like 21,000, right? And they've been really, really good together, and it's a good power play matchup. But in terms of reasons to fade them, 1, Jack Johnson's out, and that makes a huge difference. And 2, Merzlikins has been better of late. Since they put Fabro back with Werenski since they're healthy, that pair has been very good. So there's reasons to fade them. I get the play. It's a 5-game slate, so I'm not going to flag plant and be like, you're not going to see an Islander in my lineup tonight. It's definitely possible. But there are reasons to fade them. The second line, again, 13.5%. I'm not playing that line without Sipelkoff. He's not there. I know they're 12-2, but without Sipelkoff, Nelson and Palmieri have been pretty bad this season. So it will really be the Islanders' top line or bust for me. On the Columbus side, I know they have a 2.4 total, and they've been a bit better defensively, but Sorokin has not been great this season. They don't have a good penalty kill. They don't take a lot of penalties. In fact, they almost take none. But that top line for Columbus is fully correlated, and they're coming in at 2% owned on a 5-game slate. They are 18-6, which is a bit of a concern with a 2.4 road total, but they are fully correlated. They go out a bunch with Werenski. So if you're MMEing, I think I'd be more likely to get to some Columbus one. We'll talk about defensemen at the end. Obviously, Werenski can play, but like at their ownership, I want to take a stab at them at 2% ownership on a 5-game slate. We've seen them go nuts before. Voronkov is excellent around the net. Marchenko's having an unbelievable season. Fantilli's not Monahan, but he's becoming more comfortable in the role he's in. So I don't mind taking a stab at that ownership. My favorite line in this game is the Islanders' top line, but that ownership and reasons to fade them are giving me a little bit of pause.
Yeah, I think it's very much worth talking about Columbus here. We mentioned it on Saturday's show that they had been performing better defensively than they were earlier in the season. And one thing I noticed is that Jack Johnson's only played in 3 games so far in January. I thought that was part of it. So I went and looked at Columbus's numbers this year. With Jack Johnson on the ice at 5-on-5, I think he's played a little over 300 minutes. 4.0 goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. To put that into a little bit of context about how bad 4.0 goals against per 60 minutes is, the worst team in the NHL this season by goals against per 60, like as a team, is Pittsburgh. Jack Johnson's 33% worse than Pittsburgh. To put that into that context. Without him on the ice, it's 2.4. 2.4 is about the league average, right? So they go from 33% worse than the absolute worst defensive team to about league average whenever Jack Johnson isn't playing. And it wasn't just a 5-on-5. It was on the penalty kill as well. Over 40 minutes on the penalty kill, or at 4-on-5 specifically, with Jack Johnson on the ice, 62.6 shots against, 11.7 goals against. It's like Minnesota-esque. It's horrific. When he's not on the ice for the penalty kill, the shots against go from 63 down to 49, and the goals against go from 11.7 to 8. Now, 8 goals against and 49 shots against would be a little bit worse than league average, but not Minnesota bad. So I do think it matters. And like Jordan Harris isn't playing. Jordan Harris hasn't been good for Columbus either defensively. I do think it matters adding Fabro to the lineup and taking Jack Johnson and Severson back and healthy, and taking out Jack and Jake Christensen getting a regular role, and taking out Jack Johnson and Jordan Harris. I do think like those are the things that matter a lot to a team defensively. Now, with that said, it's still just a 5-game slate, and that Islanders top line has been really, really good. I went because I do believe Patrick Waugh was hired by the Islanders on January 19th of last year. So it would be 365 days that he's been the coach. That top line together, 73 shot attempts, 3.1 expected goals per 60 minutes in the last calendar year. They had trouble finishing in the second half of the season. Liam Barzal have been better at that so far this season when they played together. So they have been a pretty good line. Bo Horvat, 3 shots per game over his last 20 games. Like, this is a pretty good line that's perfectly correlated going up against a Columbus top line that, even if they've improved defensively without some weaker players in the lineup, would be average at best in their own end. It's still a pretty good spot for the Islanders top line. So I don't mind going to Islanders 1 here. It's a fine matchup. It's not a great, I don't think this is like a matchup of like early November Columbus. I do think it's still a fine matchup. But I do think by the same token, at 25 to 30% ownership, I do think there are reasons not to play them, right? It's like, do they have a 1 in 3 chance of having being a top 2 line tonight? Probably not. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't argue against playing them. I will say I'm not playing them personally, and I will say that I do think Columbus's defense is going to be better taking sub NHL caliber players out and putting NHL caliber players in. Like that, I just think that's just the reality of the situation. So I do think the Islanders top line has been good. I don't disagree with playing them. I'm saying I'm not, considering that they're probably going to push 30% in some single entry contest. I think that's ridiculous on a 5-game slate. So out on Islanders 1, Islanders 2, like it's just Islanders 1 magnified. So I guess this is a game where I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm going to put my faith in the Columbus defense to kind of hold us in there and just hope that the Islanders don't go off. Because if they do go off, I'm going to be sunk. But again, the Islanders top line has generated extremely well. I just don't think that this is the same Columbus team it was 2 months ago. So out on the Islanders, I'd much rather play Columbus here. Like, if nobody's going to play Columbus, it's one of those things. It's like, if there's nobody left to play Columbus 1, it's because I'm dead. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. Marchenko, Voronkov, Fantilli in the 5 games without Sean Monahan, like the most recent 5 games, 62 shot attempts, 3.3 expected goals, 3.7 actual goals. Not getting a ton of ice time. That's what worries me. Like 17 to 19 minutes, maybe you can push 20 on a good night for like Marchenko or something, but they're not getting like the 20 to 21 minutes you might expect them to get, considering the depth of that lineup. It's like,
I love Cole Sillinger, baby.
I don't get it, but they've been really good since Monahan went out. They were really good earlier in the season when Monahan spent a few games down on the second line. So, I mean, the Islanders are better defensively. Like, yes, Ilya Sorokin's in net. Has anybody actually looked at Sorokin's season so far? 900 save percentage. His goals saved above expected is not good. He's currently on the season, he's sitting at -2.5 in his 31 games. Like, being a negative goal saved above expected should probably tell you that Sorokin's just not been playing that well. Now, the Islanders have been fine defensively, but 2%, man. Like, if nobody's going to play them, this feels like a good night to play Columbus. Like, anything can happen in a single game of hockey, and the line has been good besides that. So I'm in on Columbus 1. The wingers are getting expensive. Marchenko is priced up. Voronkov's over 6K. If you want to take one of them out to save some money and put in Kent Johnson instead because he's on the power play with him, I think that's fine. The Islanders don't take penalties, but their power play sucks, or penalty kill sucks. So my favorite line in this game is Columbus 1. I think Islanders 1 is fine. Not interested in the Islanders' depth at all. I will say, like, you mentioned Cole Sillinger. At least he's getting ice time. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to play probably between 18 and 20 minutes. Kent Johnson's on the top power play unit. That two-man is 8,200. It's like, it feels like a reasonable two-man if you want to dip down to Columbus 2. That's probably as far as I would go here. So for me, it's Columbus 1, Islanders 1, maybe a two-man from Columbus 2 or something like that. And that's it.
Yeah, chalk Islanders makes me nauseous, but it's a 5-game slate. You got to consider them. Carolina Hurricanes with a 3.6 total heading into Chicago. The Hawks have a 2.3 total. Carolina going Aho, Svechnikov, Jackson Blake, Netchis, Roslovic, Jack Drury. Teravainen was on the team. It is Seth Jarvis, Stahl, and Martinook. Carolina going Bedard, Bertuzzi, Nazar, Teravainen, Mikheyev, Dickinson, whatever. I got confused with Teravainen because I started looking down the list for Carolina 3, but Carolina 3 has a higher top 2 stack than any line on Chicago. That's why I couldn't find them. I'll start on Chicago. I'm pretty much out despite it being a 5-game slate. I will say Nazar, Bedard, Bertuzzi, if they can gain the zone, create a lot. Now, the problem is they have problems gaining the zone. But of the matchups, they'll probably see that Drury Roslovic Netchis line a fair bit, and that's probably their weakest defensive line. I guess you could argue Aho, but if you happen to get to like Bedard, Bertuzzi, and MME, fine. In single entry, I'm out on the Hawks. This is a Carolina game, and there are 2 specific lines of interest for me. The first one would be Aho, Svechnikov, Blake at 15,600. I like Jackson Blake. It is kind of weird that they're taking Roslovic down to the second line and replacing him with Jack Roslovic named Jackson Blake, but it's fine because he's cheaper. They're going to see the Mikheyev, Dickinson, Teravainen matchup. Like, they're fine. It's not the Dickinson, Joey Anderson, like 2.4 expected goals against per 60 minutes. Like, that's fine. But, like, Peter Mrazek has under a 900 save percentage, and Aho, Svechnikov generally have been really, really good this season. So I do like Carolina 1 here, 15,600 and 15.4%. I'd rather play them than Islanders 1 at 26%. Chicago has a decent penalty kill, but like Carolina's power play is all right. Ghost is back, so that maybe helps a little bit. I'm not really stacking for Carolina power play here. If you happen to get some power play correlation, cool. But I'm not going out of my way to take off Blake and add in Netchis or something like that. The other line that I do like is Carolina 3, Jarvis, Stahl, Martinook. They've been really good this season. They were really good last season. 3 expected goals per 60, 2.8 actual. It's not surprising that a Stahl line has a low shooting percentage, but that one, like Cliffy's talked about it on shows last season, that like Stahl is the perfect center for Seth Jarvis. So not only that, they're going to see bottom 6 matchups from the Hawks, and like, buddy, that is some scary stuff. So like, I do really like Jarvis, Stahl, Martinook at 5.3%, especially if you're like trying to power play stack the Leafs. They're only 12,900. That will help you get in there. Like, I do really like Carolina 3. If you want to play Carolina 1, that's fine. But honestly, my favorite line in this game is Carolina 3.
Yeah. I'll start on the Chicago side. Listen, like, I know they've been producing recently. I understand that. This is my job. I have to follow them. With Bedard and Bertuzzi on the ice over Chicago's last 20 games. Now, it's been 20 games with the new coach, right? With them on the ice at 5-on-5, Chicago's shooting over 17%. Over the last 20 games, with Dickinson and Teravainen on the ice, Chicago's shooting over 13%. Over the last 20 games with Hall and Donato on the ice, Chicago's shooting over 12%. That's 3 different line combinations between 12 and 17% shooting. To put that into perspective, over the last season and a half, Nikita Kucherov is at 12.1% and Kirill Kaprizov is at 11.7%. Okay. This team is running hotter than all hell. It's unbelievable how hot they're running, because they're not. You're right, like Bertuzzi and Nazar and Bedard have been creating fine. It's also been 2 games. It's like I'm not going to put like honestly that like basically any stock into it. They're just not generating anything. Like, yes, any NHL team can get lucky. That's why you can win GPPs with Chicago. You can win GPPs with Anaheim. People have done it. It just doesn't happen very often. They're getting very lucky right now. I don't like just playing teams because they're getting lucky. So like, honestly, if anything, like, I can't believe that this is coming out of my mouth. The line that I would have interest in is Hall and Donato. Donato's on the power play, so at least he gets power play time. Hall and Donato, at least they're creating well when they're playing together. Like, they're actually creating shots. You know what I mean? Versus the rest of the lines, which basically aren't and have to bank on shooting 15% to try to be, reasonably productive offensively. So if you need a cheap 2-man like Hall Donato or something like that, but honestly, I'm out on Chicago. For me, it's the Carolina side. Carolina 3 is where my interest is. Jarvis, Stahl, Martinook. Stahl had a hat trick game not that long ago. Okay. But together this season, 75 shot attempts, 3 expected goals, 2.7 actual goals per 60 minutes. Jarvis is playing over 20 minutes a game, taking nearly 3 shots per game over his last 10. Stahl and Martinook, they're playing like 15 minutes-ish. Part of it's penalty kill time, but they have a sample going back a couple years with Jarvis, basically since Jarvis stepped into the league, that whenever they do play together, they're fairly dominant. And as you said, they're going to miss the Dickinson matchup, which is basically the only matchup you have to be concerned about from the Chicago side. Whether they face Bedard, whether they face Donato, it honestly doesn't matter. They should be able to run them all over. So I really do like Carolina 3 here. They're not coming in with that much ownership, 5.3% against a 3.6% top 2 stack. They're priced as a filler at $12,900. This isn't a spot where I'm targeting the power play, because Chicago, for as much as we slander them, they do have a good penalty kill. And even if the power play does get there, you have Seth Jarvis for some correlation anyway. So for me, it's Carolina 3 in this game that I do like the best. If you want to go up to Carolina 1, like, I'm a Jackson Blake fan. He's actually been playing pretty well this season. I wrote about him over at my newsletter last week. His expected goals and points, primary points per 60 minutes, it's kind of in the realm of Troy Terry this year, which is pretty absurd for a rookie. Now, I know playing on Carolina helps more than playing in Anaheim, God knows, but he has been pretty good. Just, you don't hear about him because he's playing on the 4th line. When he plays 10, 11 minutes, he just can't produce a lot on a per-game basis. On the top line, that's a different story. Svechnikov is still kind of scuffling a little bit. I honestly don't know what's going on with him. There's a lot of worrying stuff, like in his underlying stats that I've been seeing. He's not shooting a ton. Svechnikov has 32 shots in his last 15 games. This is a guy, like, when he's rolling, is like 3.5 shots per game, and now you're like, well, at least he's getting 2. Like, it feels like he's struggling. So Carolina 1 is fine. It's obviously if you're 150 maxing or whatever, you play them. But I think Carolina 3 is my favorite line in this game, and I'm out on Chicago.
Yeah. Chicago. What a franchise, man. Winnipeg Jets, they 3.1 total. Heading into Utah, Les Sockers have a 2.5 total. This is a tough matchup for the Soakers here. I know they're home, and I know they can dictate matchups. It's just, Connor Hellebuyck is just having another ridiculously good season. And I see Utah 1 getting 10.8% projected ownership. I get it from the standpoint that the way you can beat Hellebuck is on the power play. They're also going to be seeing, Winnipeg 1 of the lines to face. Like Winnipeg 1 is probably their worst defensive line, and they've even been better of late. So like they were kind of like Pittsburgh 1 early in the season trading chances. They've kind of shorted up a little bit here. Like Winnipeg or like Utah 1's fine. I don't think I'm going to get there. I think I'd rather play Carolina 1. Islanders 1, if you take it like ownership agnostic, I think I'd rather play the Islanders here. You throw ownership into the mix, you can do whatever you need to do. I never really care about ownership unless it's like bad chalk, and I think the Islanders are somewhat of a bad chalk, but like I'm fine. Like let's just say like you're playing the $20 5 max. Like if you have 1 of 5 Utah 1 here, I'm okay with it. Like, and that will get you double the field. But the more basically what I'm saying, the more lineups you're making, the more likely I would get to Utah 1. Utah 2, I think they're fine at 9,600. Like they've been really, really good in a small sample. The problem is that they're running into Lowry and Ehlers, and that line has been ridiculously good as well. And I think I'd rather play them. But if you need a line under 10K, if you're doing some ridiculous power play stack, I think you could do like a Hayton Doan or a Doan Michelli, something like that. So I think Utah 1's fine. Utah 2, if you need a really cheap line. On the Winnipeg side, I do have interest in Winnipeg 1 here. They're only coming in at 6.3% projected because, Toronto against Jonas Johansson is getting a lot of that ownership, and they're in a similar price range. And this is a very, very good power play spot. It's not the best 5-on-5 spot. Like Utah 1 has generally been good defensively. They got Marino back, who's one of their better defensive defensemen. Sergeyev is out, though, and it is Connor Ingram in net, who has struggled this season. And again, very, very good power play spot. Even some in our chat will call Winnipeg 1 power play merchants. If that's true, this is a great spot for them. So I do really, really like Winnipeg 1 here at 6.3% projected. You want to go to Winnipeg 2, like that's fine as a filler. They're coming in over leveraged, but again, like on a short slate, any filler line worth a damn is going to be negatively leveraged. Ehlers has been an integral part to the power play, so if you do want to get him in, I think that's fine. Cliffy thinks that Lowry is easily their best second-line center. I tend to agree with him there. You want to do a 2-man of that, I think that's fine. But for me, this is a Winnipeg 1 game.
Yeah, I'll start on the Utah side. Like, the Utah top line is running very hot. Since Genther went down, they're shooting 21% at 5-on-5. Like half that would be pretty high. So, nice little run they've been on. It's going to come down. Here's the problem with Utah is like, if I look at the lines between like 16 and 19K, there's 4 of them here tonight. There's this Utah line. There's the Islanders that we talked about. There's Tampa 2, and then Columbus. Like if I didn't really care about ownership, I would much rather play the Islanders here tonight. If I did care about ownership, I would probably rather play Columbus. Yes, they are $2,400 more expensive. Top 2 stack is a little bit lower because of the, because of their one reason is because of their low total, but they're coming in at a fraction of the ownership. So again, like if I don't care about ownership, I'd just go play the Islanders. If I do care about ownership, I would just go play Columbus. That's kind of the where I am against Utah. Is like I don't really like stacking against Connor Hellebuck. Like,
yeah, that's just a chore.
You know what I mean? He has had a couple bad games this season, but over the last 2 months, he's only given up more than 3 goals once. Like 2 months of starts, and he's given up more than 3 goals once. And they got Dylan Sandberg back recently, and Sandberg, maybe like not a household name or whatever, but if you look at his impact on the second pair for Winnipeg, playing with Neil Pionk over the last couple of seasons, the defensive difference with Sandberg there or Sandberg injured is massive for Pionk. Like, Pionk's bad. I don't know what the Jets coaches see in him. He is not a second pair defenseman on a Stanley Cup contender. Dylan Sandberg carries him to pretty good defensive numbers and has for a couple of years now. That makes a big difference as well. Winnipeg does take penalties. Their penalty kill isn't great. That would be, like you said, that'd be the one reason why I would have a little interest in Utah if I was playing a bunch of lineups. But a single entry, like I said, if I didn't care about ownership, I'll play the Islanders. If I do care about ownership, I'll play Columbus. That's just kind of where I am with that price range. I think I agree with you. I'd rather play Utah like the second line, like a two-man stack of like Doan and Michelli or something like that, or Doan and Hayton to pair with, expensive Toronto, expensive Tampa Bay, those types of things. Other than that, I'm out on Utah. On the Winnipeg side, it's a good matchup for the power play, for Winnipeg's power play, just because Utah does take a lot of penalties. They're at 2.9 times shorthanded per game over the last 2.8, over the last 2.9. Read it wrong. Over the last 5 weeks, that's sixth in the NHL. Over the course of the season, they're second in the NHL for power play opportunities given to the opponent. So Winnipeg doesn't draw a ton of power plays, but they're around league average, not bad. So they could get, at least 2, 3, maybe 4 power plays here tonight. If they do that, they could have a pretty good night. I'd still much rather play Toronto, but this is the pivot if you don't want to play a line that could be 25-30% owned, obviously. So I think in that situation, it'd be fine to play Winnipeg. But it's another one of those situations, like on the Utah side, it's like if I don't care about ownership, I would just go play Toronto. That's just kind of the way it is. So Winnipeg one, I think, is definitely in play. I think I would still rather lean towards Toronto, but other than that, I'd rather play them than Pittsburgh, and certainly Pittsburgh, and I'd rather play them than Tampa Bay, who's $5,000 more expensive. So if you don't want to play Toronto, I think this is the next best option. Second and third lines, like Lowry and Ehlers, Lowry Ehlers two-man or something like that, I guess is okay. It just feels like if Ehlers is going to get there, it's going to be on the power play. So then if the power play gets there, I probably want the top guys. You know what I mean? That's just kind of the way that I look at it. I think I'd almost rather dip down another line and go to a Perfidi Niederreiter two-man or something like that. You know what I mean? Niederreiter has typically been able to drive the play. Him and Perfidi actually do have good numbers together this season. 2.7 expected goals, 2.6 actual goals per 60 minutes. 2.5 expected goals, 3.6 actual goals per 60 minutes. So they have been scoring. They're not super expensive. Niederreiter does like to shoot. I think Winnipeg 3 is one of those fillers that I would look towards, like a Perfidi Niederreiter two-man or something like that. Otherwise, Winnipeg 1's my favorite line in this game. Probably prefer the Utah depth over the Utah top line just because there are other options in that price range where Utah 1 is that I'd rather play. Yeah,
and your point about Winnipeg 2 to 3 is a good one because, one, that Hayton line has been ridiculously good defensively, and the Bukestad line hasn't been as good. So, yeah, I don't mind Perfidi there. Pittsburgh Penguins with a 2.4 total. Heading into Los Angeles, the Kings have a 3.1. You see in chat, Quick Party says, looks like no Ricky Racks for Pittsburgh today.
Yeah.
I see the line.
Anthony Beauvillier top line, Cody Glass taking Beauvillier's spot on the second line.
That doesn't seem like a filler because Beauvillier, Crosby, Russ started this season, game 1 like that. So I would assume that Ricky Racks is out here tonight. Not that I'm running out to play Pittsburgh here tonight. I don't really like stacking against the Kings. So it would be Crosby, Beauvillier, Rust, Bunting, Malkin, Glass, O'Connor, Hayes, Tomasino. Kings going Fiala, Deneau, Moore, Kempe, Kopitar, Turcotte, Byfield, Fogle, Jeannot. Lots of ownership here on the Kings for good measure. 26% on that Fiala, Deneau, Moore line. That's a lot. They're only 12,700 though, and they're going to get middle six matchups of Pittsburgh, and that's just.
I actually looked at that. The last couple home games the Kings have had, they've been using the Danault line in the shutdown matchup, and Kempe and Kopitar against second and third lines.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Not that really changes anything because the top line is kind of.
I was going to say, this isn't one of the matchups where, like, I don't think it, like, from the Los Angeles perspective offensively, I honestly don't think it matters who matches against whom.
Yeah. So, like, 25.7% projected ownership is a lot for a line that has 2.7 expected goals per 60, 2.2 actual. I'm kind of in a quandary about what to do with them. If I had to play a 26% line, I'd play this Kings line like 90 out of 100 times compared to the Islanders top line here. But at that ownership, I think I'm going to start going to other lines like Kempe, Kopitar, Turcotte at 15,000, 13.6% projected. Like Turcotte has been very, very good on that line. 2.7 expected goals, 4 actual in an over 200 minute sample. Again, like the matchups don't really matter, but like if Kopitar is going to get those second line matchups, like the Malkin line has been way worse defensively than the top line, and the top line hasn't been great defensively. So I think I would go to Kempe, Kopitar, Turcotte over Fiala, Danault, Moore, just at half the ownership. And if you need something super cheap like Byfield, Fogels, they've been pretty good this season in a large sample, and Byfield's still on the top unit. So I don't mind a 2-man there, especially if you're trying to power play stack the Jets or the Leafs or trying to jam in Tampa 1. So, like, I think my favorite line on the Kings is Kopitar, Kempe, Turcotte. I understand the Fiala play because they're a filler. It's just that ownership is a bit high. And I don't mind Byfield, Fogel as a filler. On the Pittsburgh side, I'm out.
Yeah, this is I know we say it every time the Kings play. I mean, it's just because it keeps being true. And I know the Kings gave up 4 goals to Seattle the other night.
There's outliers on every graph.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, one of those was an empty netter. Like, they only gave up 3 goals plus the empty net. Like, I'm not that worried about it. Like the Gavrikov-Anderson pairing in 17 games at home this year have been on the ice for 4 goals against at 5-on-5. It's like a 1 goal against like every 4.25 games or something like that. Is preposterous how good they are defensively. The penalty kill, we talk about it every show. Like, it was the Kings' penalty kill was very shaky through like the first month, basically for like the last 2.5 months. It's been pretty good. If you want to look at, just the last 5 weeks specifically, the Kings are second in the league by penalty kill percentage. They're only giving up 0.29 power play goals against per game. It's the second lowest mark next to Dallas. So, like, it's a pretty bad power play spot for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh doesn't have a very good power play to begin with. It's a brutal 5-on-5 matchup. The top line's falling apart. Our pets' heads are falling off. Like, there's just a lot of reasons not to play Pittsburgh here tonight. So single entry, I'm out 150. Obviously, that's a different story. For me, it's what to do with the Kings. Like, there's a lot of ownership on that Fiala, Danault, Moore line. They do get good minutes. I would rather play Kings 1 here. Kempe, Kopitar, Turcotte. It's only 15K. I'd rather play them than Utah here tonight. It's a great 5-on-5 matchup. It's even a good power play matchup. Now, the Kings don't draw a lot of power plays, and the power plays honestly struggled besides that. But the Pittsburgh penalty kill has been on a pretty big slide since the first few weeks of the season, basically. On the PK, they're bottom half of the league by penalty kill percentage over the last 5 weeks. They're tied with Montreal for power play goals against per game, and that's definitely not a team that you want to be tied with for power play goals against per game over those last 5 weeks. So it's not a bad power play matchup for the Kings. You get Kempe and Kopitar on that top unit. Turcotte, he doesn't play at the end of games, so maybe he won't get an empty netter or anything like that. But he's cheap enough, and this line's cheap enough where you don't really have to worry about it. I really do like Kings 1. They've kind of slowed down a little bit. Their last 15 games, 2.2 expected goals, but they're still scoring. Kopitar and Kempe playing 20 plus because they run an 11 forward, 7 defenseman setup. Turcotte's at nearly 2 shots per game, even though he doesn't get top power play time and only plays like 14 minutes or whatever. So like he's still contributing offensively. I really do like Kings 1 here. I think the Kings have 3 playable lines depending what you want to do with your lineup. But for me, it's Kings 1. Fiala, Danault, more if you want to play them at 25% ownership, like go ahead. I think I'd rather play Carolina 3 at 5% ownership or whatever. That's just kind of the way that I look at it. But, you know, if you want to play them, they're a good line. Go ahead. Byfield, Foegele, Jeannot, I worry about. I mentioned it to you in our chat that they took Tanner Jeannot off that line late in that game against Seattle, put Brandt Clark up there. So that's what they think of Tanner Jeannot right now, is they replaced him with a defenseman. So like I have concerns about that line sticking together for the entire game. So probably the Kempe, Kopitar, Turcotte line for me. If you're not worried about ownership, need a cheaper line than Jeannot line.
Yeah. Let's talk about defensemen here. Top of the board, Werenski is $3,000 more than any other defenseman. But I do want to give you a little stat here on Werenski. In his last 15 games, 12 of those games have been 27 minutes or more. 16 of the 17 have been 24, 14 or higher. And the one game he was under 24 minutes, it was 21 minutes against Boston on December 27th, and he had 37.6 DK points in that game. This dude just does not leave the ice. So 12 of the last 15 games, he's played 27 or more minutes. He's gone over 30 multiple times. Now, if you can fit him, I think that is obviously fine. I don't think I would go out of my way to make room for Werenski. But if you can fit him, I think you play him. I put him in a different stratosphere than the other guys. That's why I talked about him first. After him, you have Dobson, Hedman, Morrissey, Seth Jones, Carlson, Brandt, Clark. I think Dobson is in a pretty good spot here at 6,500. He's actually been getting pretty good minutes. Sometimes you worry about him only playing 20-21. He's been playing 23, 24-ish. So it's a good power play spot. The Islanders' power play sucks, but like he's at least there. So I'm fine with that. Hedman's in a decent power play spot. Morrissey's in a decent power play spot. I don't think I'll be spending up, though. Like, you have Kesselring still running a top power play. You know what I mean? I think I'll be in the mid-range and the cheap guys tonight if I'm not spending up for Werenski. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, obviously because of the low total, Werenski's just not projecting that well. 12.85 DK points, the point per dollar at 1.35. As far as I can see, that's one of the lowest on the entire board. It might be the lowest on the board here tonight. So, you know, like you said, if you have the money for him, then pay up for him. But I don't think he's the first guy in my lineup. But there are a lot of cheap lines here tonight, so you can play Columbus 1 plus Werenski. You know what I mean? And then just go cheap elsewhere. I do think that's something in play. In general, I'm not a big fan of the expensive defenseman here tonight. Like I said earlier, I'm not a huge fan of the Islanders on this slate, considering their ownership. Like Noah Dobson's ownership's projected at 27%. He's the highest projected defenseman here tonight. Nobody else is over 20%, and only Josh Morrissey projected over 15%. So, like, he's going to be far and away the chalkiest defenseman. And it's like, it's always one of those things. It's like when an Islanders player is the far and away chalkiest player at his position on a DFS slate, it's just red flags for me. So, and I don't particularly love Hedman now that Radish is getting some power play time. You know what I mean? So, not really super excited about the expensive defenseman. Like Morrissey's fine. You know, Gostisbehere is back. He's not super expensive, 4,400. He doesn't he may not get a ton of minutes, but he does, run the puck when he's on the ice. So he's very involved in the play when he does play. Honestly, there's just not a lot amongst the expensive guys I want to play. Like, I'm looking at the guys that are over 4K. We went over Werenski, Dobson, Hedman, like Morrissey, like Brent Burns is going to be off the power play. Brant Clark, like we laughed at Brant Clark playing forward against Seattle the other night. He still only played 13 minutes in that game. Like, they're just not giving him ice time. That's why you've seen Clark's price just keep declining. Erik Karlsson's in a really bad matchup. Seth Jones is in a really bad matchup. Morgan Riley doesn't get power play time. Like Neil Pionk, that I guess Pionk's playable, but like there's just not a lot on the board. So I think it's cheap defenseman tonight. You mentioned Kesselring running the power play. Adam Pelech getting 22, 23 minutes. Romanov is back. We'll see how that impacts him. But like Ian Cole, with Sergachev out the other night, Ian Cole played 23 and a half minutes. And this is a guy that blocks a lot of shots anyways. Ian Cole's in play, like Jake McCabe. Jake McCabe's playing a ton the last couple of games since he returned, 24, 26, and he's only 3,000 for Toronto. Dante Fabro getting decent ice time for Columbus, like Alex Vlasic, especially with Connor Murphy still out, is getting good ice time. He was up, he's up to 24 minutes a game over his last 10. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, even with McCabe back, is getting 22 minutes a game. Louis Crevier is a block shot option against Carolina for sure at under 3K. Jordan Spence getting decent ice time for the Kings, even though they're running 7 defensemen. Like I think there are just more appealing options, like especially under like 4,500 here tonight than spending up. So I'm not sure I'm going to have a defenseman like over 4,500, certainly over 5K in my lineup here tonight.
Yeah, the one I'll add is like, I know if you look at his game log, it's just like he had a combo meal last game, and you don't expect that at 2,800. But Dylan Sandberg, I think, for some block shots at 2,800, playing 20 minutes is also viable. Let's talk about goalies, even though I don't want to. It's an ugly goalie slate. Every slate is an ugly goalie slate, but this one's particularly poopers. I do agree with Cliffy there. I would have liked the Blues Vegas game on this slate. The Sharks have come back to take the lead. Will Smith, best game in his young career, it looks like. But let's talk about goalies here. I didn't see a Carolina confirm.
Yeah, me neither. I know because Freddie Anderson is back.
I'd be kind of interested to play Freddie Anderson here. Maybe. Like, the options are so bad. Like, I think Hellebuck at 8,200 is like sticks out like a sore thumb. So like from that standpoint, like why would you spend 8,400 for a Carolina goaltender when you have Hellebuck right there? And I get it. So Hellebuck is the guy for me. I think Woll, like, I don't love Woll, but I think this is a winnable game for the Leafs with Jonas Johansson at the other side. So I don't mind him there. It's just from like a lack of options, right? Like, I don't really want to play Merzlikins. I don't really want to play Jonas Johansson. I don't really want to play Connor Ingram. I think of those three, I would take a stab on Connor Ingram. Like Joel Blomqvist, maybe. Peter Mrazek, maybe. But like, really, I think I'll be deciding between like Hellebuck and like the guys above him. So like, I don't particularly love the cheaper guys, as someone says in chat that Anderson's starting. Like, I don't know. Like, I usually don't like spending up for goalie, but like these cheaper options leave a lot to be desired here tonight.
Yeah, I think Hellebuck at 8,200 just makes a lot of sense. It feels one of those nights where like if he gives up like 2 goals on 27 shots and gets the win, then I'm fine with that. You know what I mean? Like he does have the second highest projection. It's actually behind Ilya Sorokin. I think Sorokin's fine too. Just because the Islanders don't take penalties and like Columbus having to light them up all at 5-on-5 might be a little bit of a stretch. So I guess Sorokin's okay, but Hellebuck's for the expensive goalies certainly my favorite. For the cheaper goalies, like I don't mind Merzlikins. Like it's not like the Islanders are some juggernaut offensive team. You know what I mean? Like this could be 2-1 overtime, 3-2 overtime game pretty easily. I don't mind Merzlikins if you want to pay down. I will say Blomqvist is kind of interesting for Pittsburgh. Just for the reason that Pittsburgh's penalty kill has been struggling. That's resulted in some goals against. But the Kings don't draw power plays, and their power play sucks anyway. Yes, they can absolutely light them up at 5-on-5, and that's why I do like the Kings stacks, generally speaking, here tonight. But, you know, I'm playing 20 lineups. I might have 1 or 2 with Blomqvist. Like, it's, you know, this is one of the games where Pittsburgh wins. I don't think Pittsburgh wins because they win 7-5. I think Pittsburgh wins because Blomqvist has a good game and they manage a couple past Kemper if he starts. Also, speaking of which, I haven't seen anything confirmed on the Kings. It feels like it might be a Riddick start here tonight, just because it's been 3 in a row for Kemper. They usually don't play Kemper more than 4 in a row before giving Riddick a start. And, you know, they lost their last game. So it feels like a good night to give him an easy start and then go back to Kemper on Wednesday. But, yeah, for me, it's Hellebuck, maybe Sorokin. If I'm going down, Merzlikins. If I need to go down even further, then probably Blomqvist. But there aren't really a lot of goalies that I'm really targeting here.
Yep, we will be back for sure Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. We'll have to see what the GPPs look like on Wednesday and Friday for those 4-game slates. If they're worth a damn, we will probably do a show. If they're terrible, we probably won't. We'll give you guys a heads up on the X machine. I'm not going to call it X; it's Twitter. And in Discord, who you liking for your hat trick pick?
I mean, it wasn't the same guy that I was thinking of until I saw the goalie confirmations. I'm going with Bobby McMahon.
Bob McMahon. I am going. I feel like I cop out every time the Kings are on a short slate, but he's my guy. I'm going Adrian Kempe.
Yeah, fair enough. Pretty good. Yeah, it's a pretty good spot for Kings 1 here.
Yeah. So we'll see you guys tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern. Good luck, everybody, tonight. And we'll see you in Discord for some ribeye talking catering trays.
Good luck tonight, everyone.